Okay, let's today talk about a typical staple of many bodybuilding diets and also athletes' diets. And what I'm going to talk about is rice. Should you eat rice? Is rice healthy? Is it worth eating? Before I talk about some of the specifics about rice, I want to discuss carbohydrates in general. There's basically two types of carbohydrate. There's the natural carbohydrate that's found in foods such as fruits and vegetables. These types of carbohydrates are usually found naturally with fiber, dietary fiber, either soluble or insoluble fiber. Now, what difference does that make? Well, the fiber content that's found in, let's say, fruits and vegetables, oatmeal, and other carbohydrate foods, it slows down the uptake of the carbohydrate in the body. In other words, the carbohydrate, the sugar or carbohydrate contained in these foods doesn't hit you like a bat. In other words, it doesn't. It's the carbohydrates are absorbed. The dietary fiber slows the absorption of the carbohydrates naturally found in those foods. The result is less insulin secretion, which is better for you in many ways. For one thing, insulin stimulates body fat accretion. It lowers your blood sugar. It can make you too hungry, although insulin right after a meal actually depresses appetite. A lot of people don't know that. That's one of the reasons why fructose tends to be particularly fattening, because it doesn't stimulate an insulin release. And insulin secreted right after a meal actually depresses appetite. But in other cases, when you take in a refined carbohydrate, you get a little bit too much of an insulin release. It lowers blood sugar or blood glucose too fast, makes you hungry where you want to eat more. You wind up eating excessive amounts of calories. Now, I have a little pet peeve with some of these people online, and most of the people that I'm referring to, they almost always have advanced degrees, such as PhDs or doctorates. A couple of them have MDs. They make statements that just absolutely nauseate me, and I just go nuts when I hear them say this kind of stuff. They will make statements that insulin cannot make you fat, and they said that insulin is just an innocent bystander. Whether insulin makes you fat or not, or promotes fat accretion or fat gains, depends on the total calorie content. In other words, insulin won't make you or won't promote fat gains unless you overeat calories. Now, that's true, but what they overlook is that insulin directly blunts every mechanism in the body that's involved in getting rid of fat, such as fat oxidation, while it also promotes the storage of fat. They've shown in isolated cell studies that if a cell is exposed to large amounts of insulin alone without carbohydrate, it tends to increase fat deposition or storage in the fat cell. But that's not the part that bothers me. The insulin effect, it's a big battle right now. We have some scientists saying that insulin does promote fat gains, other scientists saying that insulin is an innocent bystander and it's total calories that count. The part that bothers me is this nonsense that some scientists say, particularly ones that say that insulin has no effect on fat gains, when they say that carbohydrates do not promote fat gains. If you eat an excess amount of carbohydrate, the carbohydrate is simply oxidized. Carbohydrate cannot make you fat. I have found in my life that is such utter bullshit. I've dealt with literally almost thousands of people who also have noticed the same thing. When they eat an excess amount of carbohydrates, sometimes it's not even an excessive amount. And in those cases, it's not that carbohydrates make you fat. It's that carbohydrates prevent let's say, a substantial loss of fat. They blunt fat loss. These individuals are what's known as they're insulin insensitive. When you're insulin insensitive, your body tends to kick out too much insulin, and as I said, insulin will depress fat oxidation. That's an established fact. It's in every biochemical book. Where they get this idea that any amount of carbohydrates will be oxidized in the liver is such utter nonsense. I mean, these people have doctorates, and people believe them because they have these advanced degrees. Oh, they must know the truth. Oh, so we'll listen to them. That's bullshit. That's complete nonsense. The truth of the matter is, unless you're and a lot of it has to do with muscle glycogen stores. Your body stores carbohydrates as glycogen in the liver as liver glycogen, and in the muscles as muscle glycogen. Only the muscles can use the glycogen that's stored in them because they lack a certain enzyme that allows them to release the stored glycogen into the blood as glucose. Whereas the glycogen stored in the liver, that can be released into the blood, and the stored glycogen in the liver, one of the main purposes is to maintain a steady supply of glucose in the blood, because glucose is the only carbohydrate that circulates in the blood. Now, if your liver glycogen stores in particular are not completely filled, then it's true that you are less likely to gain body fat from eating carbohydrates, because the carbohydrates you eat will first go towards replenishing the liver and muscle glycogen. That's only in cases where the liver glycogen is not completely filled and the muscle glycogen is partially depleted. However, in most people, especially who eat carbohydrates regularly, the liver glycogen is completely filled and the muscle glycogen is filled. So if you take in carbohydrates, then where do the carbohydrates go? Since they're not going to go to glycogen, you can't fill a glass. You can't add water to a glass that's already filled. Now, according to these scientists, the glycogen is oxidized. I say that's nonsense. That's something that's theoretical, and it's maybe found in, on paper, but it doesn't happen in real life. I know myself, when I was in bodybuilding, I tried every diet known to man. I went from low fat, low calorie, you name it, every diet. The only diet that ever worked for me was a low carbohydrate diet. And I got the idea of doing a low carbohydrate diet from a famous bodybuilding trainer in the 60s and 70s named Vince Gironda. He advocated a low carbohydrate, specifically a meat and egg diet, where you basically lived entirely on meat and eggs. As soon as I started following it, I always had trouble getting definition and losing body fat, even as a kid. But as soon as I started going on the meat and egg diet, which basically eliminated carbohydrates, it did allow a good amount of fat, though, from the eggs and the meat. But as soon as I went on that diet, the fat just melted off me. In fact, my abs were so good that I was training at a gym when I was 14 in New York called Mid-City Gym. People used to come in and ask me to hold up my shirt to take photos of my abs. My abs were literally etched. I mean, they were etched. I didn't have any fat on them at all, and that was some low-carb diets. And as I wrote in my Applied Metabolics publication, I still believe that someone who wants to get ultra-low body fat levels for any purposes, whether it's bodybuilding or anything else, the best way to do it for just about anyone is a low carbohydrate diet. But I'm getting off on a tangent here, which I usually do, but I thought I would give you a little preface to my information about rice, because rice is a pure carbohydrate food. Now, the first thing to know, is there a nutritional requirement for carbohydrates in human nutrition? The answer is no. You do not need to eat carbohydrates, contrary to what you might hear or believe. Is glucose important for health? Yes, because glucose is the only, as I said, it's the only carbohydrate that circulates in the blood. Your brain, about 2/3 of your glucose is used by the brain. The brain is a glucose hog. But since glucose is a carbohydrate, the natural thought would be, well, I need to eat carbohydrates to get glucose. No, you do not, because glucose can be made from other substances. This is why carbohydrates are not essential. Your liver can produce glucose from other substances, including certain amino acids called glucogenic amino acids, lactate, and even the glycerol portion of fat. Fat's also known as triglycerides. It's 3 fatty acids attached to a glycerol backbone. Your liver cannot turn fatty acids into glucose, but it can turn glycerol into glucose. So that's the reason why carbohydrates are not essential. Now, this leads up to an obvious question. If carbohydrates are not essential, why would anyone ever eat rice at all? Well, rice is a good source of carbohydrates, and anaerobic exercise, such as weight training, glycogen is the preferred fuel, particularly muscle glycogen. Muscle glycogen is the main fuel that powers bodybuilding exercise, which is classified as anaerobic. And a good way when you work out, let's look at studies. Studies they did a study years ago. They found that just 3 sets of curls for the biceps, 3 sets of bicep curls depleted the glycogen storage in the bicep muscle anywhere from 24 to 48%. More recent studies show that figure was underestimated. Now they think it could be as much as 70% of the glycogen is exhausted, even after only 3 sets of bicep curls. So when you after you work out, when you deplete muscle glycogen, your body is primed to one of the first things. It's got kind of a hierarchy. What it wants to do is replenish the glycogen that was exhausted through exercise or depleted through exercise. So any carbohydrate you take in within, let's say, 2 to 4 hours after you train, is going to go mainly towards replenishing both liver and muscle glycogen. At that time, it's hard to get fat from carbohydrate because as I said, the carbohydrate is going to be used to replenish even partially depleted glycogen stores. So taking in a carbohydrate like rice or any other, even a simple carbohydrate, it's all going to go towards glycogen. But once the glycogen stores are filled, this is where I differ from some of these people. Once the glycogen stores are filled in the liver and the muscles, where does carbohydrate go? It is not oxidized in the liver. That's nonsense. What happens is the excess carbohydrate is converted into fatty acids and stored as fat. I mean, don't believe these jerk-off PhDs who tell you can't get fat from carbohydrate. That's complete bull. But let's talk about rice. Now, can rice make you fat? Is it a fattening food because it's almost pure carbohydrates? Well, let's look at it. First of all, a lot of people will point to the Asian people. Rice is very popular in Asia, China, Japan, those countries. They supposedly eat a lot of rice, and yet if you look at these people, they're very lean. You very rarely see obese people over there. And a lot of these people that advocate carbohydrates will say, well, if carbohydrates made you fat, all the rice these Asian people eat, they should be fat as tubs. They should be like Michelin men. Well, the truth of the matter is, these Asian people, a lot of them are active. And not only that, but the rest of their diet is fairly lean. They focus on lean protein foods such as fish. As a result, even though they're eating a good amount of rice, they're not eating a lot of total calories, and they're more physically active, so they burn off the calories. You can have a good amount of carbohydrates if you're very physically active. If you were, let's say, an endurance athlete or one of these people that runs ultra marathons, 100 miles, you can have a ton of carbohydrates, and you're never going to get fat from it because you are burning the carbohydrates through activity. Now, what about rice? I'm going to use myself as an example. Because of certain genetics, a lot of the males in my family, including my father and both grandfathers, they all had diabetes. Unfortunately, I inherited genes that leave me, let's say, at higher risk for type 2 diabetes. I never noticed any problems until I hit my 50s, late 50s. I noticed that my resting blood glucose started to rise, and that's indicative of insulin insensitivity. Now, I admit that a lot of it had to do, even though I was working out all the time, doing aerobics, a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was carrying too much weight. I was carrying too much body weight, and I also probably had too much body fat. When you have too much body fat, it makes you insulin insensitive. And if you have the genetics towards diabetes like I have, you could become very insulin sensitive. What does this mean? It means I'm very sensitive to carbohydrates. So years ago, I used to have my lunch was always chicken and rice. I really enjoyed that skinless chicken, like a skinless chicken breast. I cut it up into pieces, and I ate it over like a bed of rice. I used a little bit of low-sodium soy sauce, otherwise it tasted like paper. So I had a little soy sauce for flavoring. Well, about a year or two ago, I decided to go back to eating the chicken and rice. Now, I check my resting glucose every morning, or as soon as I wake up with a glucometer. It tells me what my blood glucose level is. Normal blood glucose, resting blood glucose, is 100 or less. Now, most of the time, because of my exercise and the fact that I don't eat a lot of refined carbohydrates, my resting glucose is anywhere from 85 to 95. Now, the ideal resting blood glucose for health, it would be in the 80s, something like between 80 and 85. Now, unless the only way I get mine down that low is if I eat literally no carbohydrates. Any carbohydrate I take in, even good carbohydrates like fruits and that type of thing, they're going to bring my blood glucose up to in the 90s, like 95. Also, when you're insulin insensitive, you have a problem with branched chain amino acids. For some reason, people that are insulin sensitive cannot properly metabolize branched chain amino acids. So when you eat protein foods like animal protein that contains branched chain amino acids, these also are going to raise your blood glucose. So for me, because I eat the protein foods that contain branched chain amino acids, coupled with a moderate intake of carbohydrates, most of the time my resting blood glucose is in the 90s. And sometimes gets slightly over 100. Like I said, 100 is not resting. 100 resting blood glucose is normal. Anything above 100 is considered insulin insensitive. Between 100 and let's say 20 is insulin insensitive. As soon as you get to 126 resting blood glucose, that's considered type 2 diabetes, although it's not a 100% accurate measurement. You'd want to go to hemoglobin A1C, which is that requires a blood test that measures long-term glucose use in the body. It's a more accurate way of checking your blood glucose usage. But anyway, getting back to me, when I started eating the chicken and rice again, of course, as I said, because of my insulin sensitivity, I check my resting blood glucose as soon as I wake up, because I haven't eaten in several hours. As soon as I started eating the rice, and I eat brown rice, as soon as I started eating the rice, I started getting higher blood glucose levels. And when I'm talking about higher, I'm talking, instead of being in the 90s, my average blood glucose was now 115 to 118, which is not very good. Why? Because a lot of doctors will tell their patients, especially diabetic patients, if they have very high blood glucose levels, like 300 or something like that, if they do take measures, certain drugs to bring their blood glucose down, they will tell their patients who have, let's say, a 130 or 120 blood glucose, oh, you're doing great. Not true. That's complete BS. The studies show if you have a consistent blood glucose in the 90s or above, you have a 12 times greater chance of having dementia later in life. It's not good to have consistently higher blood glucose levels. That's complete garbage. So the rice definitely raised my blood glucose, and also the rice tends to gain weight. The rice that I eat, and I don't eat a lot of rice. I eat, let's say a couple ounces. It's enough to keep my weight up. Believe it or not, the rice I eat is not oxidized, as these moron scientists say in these YouTube videos. Oh, you could eat carbohydrates; they'll never make you fat. Garbage, absolute garbage. How do I know? Because some days I don't eat the rice. I'll have, let's say, chicken alone without the rice. When I check my blood glucose the next day, it's in the 80s and low 90s. So the rice is definitely raising my blood glucose. I think is a pretty solid way to determine that. But what about rice itself? Well, if you look at white rice versus brown rice, is there a difference? Well, white rice is a highly processed food. It's a processed carbohydrate. It's garbage. You really shouldn't eat it at all. What they do with white rice is they remove the bran, which has a little bit of the fiber in rice, and the germ, and they with brown rice they take out only the whole of the rice. So brown rice is a more, let's say, complete grain food, but it's still not that great. But the white rice is almost completely devoid of vitamins and minerals because of the processing. So they usually add vitamins and minerals to white rice, just like they did with white bread. It still doesn't make it a good food. It's still a garbage food. If you're going to eat rice at all, go with the brown rice because it does have a little bit of fiber in it. Again, it's not that great. If you look at the carbohydrate content between, let's say, white rice, let's say enriched white rice, meaning the white rice that has some vitamins added, A 3.5 ounce or 100-gram portion contains 26 grams of carbohydrate, whereas brown rice contains 23 grams. So they don't differ that much in carbohydrate, but the white rice only has 0.9 grams of fiber, whereas the brown rice has 1.8 grams. Again, not that much difference. As far as the vitamins and minerals, the enriched white rice is fairly similar, but I still think that you should go brown rice. If you look at the way that it hits you, what about the carbohydrate content? How fast does it hit you between white rice and brown rice? Well, white rice has a glycemic index. Glycemic index is an indication of how fast the glucose, the carbohydrate content of any food is converted into glucose and gets into your blood. A white rice has a GI or glycemic index of 64. Brown rice 55. Not that much different, except that white rice slightly hits the blood. The carbohydrate hits the blood a little bit faster, but it hits it fast enough where white rice has been associated with an increased risk for type 2 diabetes. There's been studies in over 350,000 people where it was found that those people who ate the most white rice had a higher risk of type 2 diabetes than those who ate the least. Each serving of rice eaten per day raised the risk of type 2 diabetes by 11%. So that's mainly white rice. Brown rice has a slightly less risk. What else can I say about this? Now, you might have heard there was years ago, there was a diet at Duke University. It was called, against the vegans like to quote this study. There was a scientist who gave people who had horrible health, they had like hypertension, cardiovascular disease. This scientist at Duke University put them on a diet that consisted entirely of white rice. And sure enough, after a couple of months, most of their health problems disappeared. The high blood pressure disappeared. The blood lipids went down, reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease, and they lost weight. Of course they lost weight. White rice has almost no fat. Fat contains the most dense source of calories at 9 per gram. If you live on white rice, like these people did, sure, you're going to lose weight, but you're also not gaining a lot of nutrients, and you're getting almost no protein. And so you're going to lose a lot of muscle. It's a stupid diet. It makes no sense. And yet some vegan advocates, they quote the Duke rice diet as evidence that carbohydrates are good for health. That's just utter nonsense. Now, one of the things that's really kind of scary about eating rice is that the rice plant itself tends to accumulate more arsenic than other foods. Rice grown in certain parts of the world is contaminated with arsenic. Arsenic, of course, is a poison. Higher intake of arsenic is associated with an increased risk of cancer, cardiovascular disease, and type 2 diabetes. It's toxic to nerve function, and it can adversely affect brain function. Certain types of rice contain lower amounts of arsenic than others. These include jasmine and basmati rice, as well as rice grown in the Himalayan region. Brown rice, unfortunately, and this is the irony of it, brown rice actually contains greater amounts of arsenic than white rice. So what can you do about that? I mean, do you have to? Are you going to get poisoned if you eat this rice? Well, some people. I wrote an article in my Applied Metabolics a while back. It's available to current subscribers of Applied Metabolics. I talked about arsenic that's contained in many of the popular high protein foods and foods that are popular with bodybuilders and fitness advocates, including these foods include chicken and rice. I talked about the arsenic content and ways around it, including certain nutrients that will basically lock on to the arsenic and neutralize it. That's all. I'm not going to get into it here, but it's in that article. If you subscribe to Applied Metabolics, you can read the article. It'll allow you to eat foods like white rice or red or even brown rice without any problems. Also, you can wash the rice. If you wash the rice before you eat it, it tends to remove most of the arsenic in the rice. Now, there's a trick. As I said, rice is extremely high in carbohydrates. There's a way of slightly lowering the carbohydrates. Now, what you can do is um, you cook the rice, and then instead of whether it's well, hopefully you're eating brown rice. Wash it first to get rid of most of the arsenic. Cook it, and then rather than eat it, store it in the refrigerator for about 12 hours, then reheat it and eat it. Now, what happens there when you store it in the refrigerator for a couple of hours, the carbohydrate content of the rice is turned into something called resistant starch. Now, the word resistant should give you an idea of what happens to the carbohydrates. Resistant starch it's almost like fiber. It can't be digested, so it passes right through you. The net effect is if you refrigerate rice for a couple hours and then reheat it and eat it, you can lower the carbohydrate content as much as 50%. Now, this is something to think about if you want to eat rice, but you want to lower your carbohydrate intake. So that's something to think about. I'm still eating rice. I'm trying to cut back on it because I can't handle carbohydrates, even natural carbohydrates like brown rice. They raise my blood. They don't raise it super high, but too high for me. I mean, at my age, I have to be real conscious of this stuff. So it's to each his own. The best time to eat rice, if you do choose to eat it, would be in proximity to a workout. Like I say, within 2 and 4 hours after a workout, you've depleted a lot of your glycogen, your muscles and your liver, especially in your muscles. So if you eat your rice within 2 to 4 hours after a workout, the majority, even if you don't do that reheating trick, most of it will be used to replenish any glycogen depleted in your muscles. So it'll have less of effect at blunting fat loss and that type of thing. So that's another little tip for you. So that's about it for rice. If you want more information about nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging research, ergogenic aids, hormone therapy, supplement science, which supplements work, which ones don't. I'm not involved with any supplement company. I'm going to tell you the truth. I mean, if you look at YouTube videos, I look at other YouTube videos. I can't help it. They pop up every time I go on YouTube. I listen to them, and it seems like 99% of them these days are pushing some sort of product. In most cases, they're food supplements. I mean, hey, listen, I'm not against anyone making a buck. I have no problem. I mean, I don't make a dime. I don't make a red cent off these videos. I'm just trying to give information. And I admit that a primary purpose of me doing these videos is to promote my Applied Metabolics publication, because I think it's of extreme value to anybody who wants to know the truth about nutrition, exercise science, and all these other topics, women's health. It's all in there. It's all evidence-based. And this is my way of letting people know about it. So I don't mind doing these videos, even though I don't get any compensation at all other than tiny, what is it? I think I get a quarter of a penny if somebody clicks on an advertisement in my YouTube videos. Doesn't add up to much money. Believe me, it doesn't add up to much. I mean, the amount I get from YouTube revenue wouldn't pay even 1 month of my rent. Not even 1 month. Doesn't even come close. So anyway, that's about it. As I said, I got off on a tangent, but what I'm saying is I'm not associated with any supplement company, so I'll tell you the truth. When I do mention supplements and Applied Metabolics, I try to be generic about it. I'm not pushing any particular product. I'm not, unlike a lot of these other videos where you'll see under the video, in the little section, the information section, they'll say, use this code to get 20% off blah, blah, blah supplements. Well, what they're telling you is that they're shills. They're being paid by these supplement companies to push their products. You won't see that in any of my videos because I'm not associated with these supplement companies. I'm probably the only people on the entire YouTube that's telling you the truth about supplements and nutrition. Most of it's just garbage or it's inaccurate, either one of the two. But if you want to know the truth, again, subscribe to my Applied Metabolics, www.appliedmetabolics.com. When you subscribe, I'll send you, when you subscribe, send me an email, and I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on nutrition, exercise science, and general health and medicine. There's an email portal on my Applied Metabolics webpage where current subscribers only, I don't accept unsolicited questions. So current subscribers can send me short questions about anything they might have read in Applied Metabolics or anything else that comes to mind pertaining to nutrition, supplements, exercise. And as an appreciation of your subscription, I will answer your question. Obviously, I will not do that if you're not a subscriber. It's that simple, because I look at that as a bonus for my subscribers, for kind of an appreciation for subscribing. So again, www.appliedmetabolics.com. You also, please, you're welcome to subscribe to this YouTube channel. This channel is, as I pointed out, is completely free. I post a new video every Tuesday. And if you think these videos are of any use, please, by all means, let others know of the existence of this YouTube channel. And I guess that's all I have to say. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter and adopt a dog.